are some of your best practices for really knowing and demanding your worth?
Black people in general have lower expectations of what their peak earnings should be for the same job as their white peers. I'm an executive at the largest bank in the world right now. I've been a VP at Goldman Sachs. I've had seats at the table. If I come into this with the mindset that I gotta work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, that could put our health in danger.
I remember thinking to myself oh, I know I'm a hard worker, but am I working myself to death?
You gotta feel safe in order to do your best work. There's a learning curve to understanding what does it take to fit into a corporate culture. Sometimes these environments can be very uncomfortable for us. And one of the things that I'm trying to do with this book is to provide practical solutions to us as Black men on how to find a place of comfort, even in situations where we're gonna be uncomfortable.
Welcome back to the Working While Black Show, your go-to resource for all things career growth and entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Walter Gaynor II, and today our guest is Justin Grant. He literally just published his book, Company Man, A Wellness Guide for Black Men in Corporate America. Phenomenal read. I had him on to discuss the whole process of writing this book and some of the lessons he learned from early on in his career. We talked about the low life expectancy for Black men in corporate America and how this hustle culture is contributing to that. And we also talked about how even with all of these DEI programs and policies being removed, how it's still a great time to be a Black professional in this working world. So if you're ready to learn how to thrive in corporate America and learn how to know and demand your worth, and pay close attention because we're about to start right now. I really wish I had when I first started. To be honest with you, this whole podcast was created because when I was first getting out, I felt like I had a whole bunch of resources and tips on how to navigate my career, but nothing with the nuances on how to do it as a Black person, and a Black person is with luck. So I feel like this is almost like not even a full circle moment, but it's like, okay, finally, this podcast is like the kind of bringing us together to talk about this. So I'm excited to dive into this and your whole career and everything. But I just got to say, when I first opened this book, just impressed, right? It kind of gives me the vibes of Malcolm Gladwell at The Tipping Point, and then also just this just personal, like taking notes as you go, just like a field guide for Black professionals. And in the very first chapter, I remember thinking to myself oh, I know I'm a hard worker, but am I working myself to death? So this book is a wellness guide for Black men in corporate America. I'm excited to just dive into everything, man. But first off, how are you doing?
I'm good. Walter, thank you for having me on. And now that the book is out, I'm great. Because, it took me a while to pull this thing together, balancing a full-time job and, demands on time. But it was a marathon to write. I'm glad that part of the marathon is over, and now it's time to share it with the world.
Man, I know that's right. I have a friend who's writing a book right now. Shout out to Steve Worthy. And he started writing. He's like, yo, no one said it's going to be this hard. They said it's going to be challenging, but it takes a lot out of you, right?
Yeah, you got to like the process of doing it more than having the finished product. You got to like the routine, and you got to, build that discipline of nurturing the project, and it's an endurance test for sure.
Yeah, and you better kind of start off your whole career in journalism, working as a reporter. So, how far off is writing a book compared to the work you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I appreciate about my time as a reporter is it teaches you how to write. It teaches you about how to structure narratives, but you have to stretch out of what you're doing from a day-to-day standpoint when you're a reporter on the news front, right? That teaches you how to write very disciplined and to say a lot with as little words as possible. Writing a book is a whole different ballgame because you have to expound on ideas and you have to, think about things across broader themes. And that piece, learning how to be expansive when you've been trained to write, no more than, say, a feature story might be 500 words, right? Mm-hmm. But a book, you're talking about 70,000 words. So, you're stretching ideas out, you're analyzing them, and then you got to make sure that you're not putting people to sleep, because the reality is we're bombarded with content from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to bed. And so how am I going to say anything in a 70,000 page book? I'm sorry, 70,000 word book. How am I going to say anything in a 70,000 word book that can cut through the noise and entice somebody to put this down for a second and read through the book? I also, full knowledge that a lot of us listen to podcasts primarily. And so with that in mind, the audio version of the book is coming out on March 18th as well. So you can kind of listen to it almost as a podcast in an episodic type of a format.
Nice. Are you you're voicing it, narrating it?
Yeah, if you can
Nice.
stand the sound of my voice across 70,000 words, it's a pleasant listen.
Hey, if y'all can't make it through, get the book. You gotta consume it. But no, I love that because I grew up loving to read and just reading. Well, not everything, but just as much as I could. And just lately, just being so busy, audiobooks have been like kind of bringing me back into that. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
what's up.
hard. It's hard to sit down and focus. There's always something calling your attention away. And like I usually do my reading on the train when I'm commuting. And I developed a bit of a reputation in my town of being antisocial with my friends, on the way in. Because they'd be like, leave him alone in the morning because, he's just trying to read. And, that's your commute. You know what I'm saying? It's not personal, but like, that's my time. That's the only time that belongs to me in the whole
Right.
day. My wife and my kids get everything else, then work gets the rest. Or even, you flip that equation. So you leave me alone on that commute.
Right.
I had this convo with my friends. I developed a bad rep in my town over. I'm like, yeah, what up? And then I keep it moving.
Oh man, see, I stop. I like stop and talk. I'm terrible at saying goodbyes to people. So like, I try like not. Sometimes I do try to avoid conversations because I know once I'm in there, I can't help it. I can't help it, man. But no, I feel that. So offline, you were talking about how writing this book is kind of like therapy in a way.
Yeah,
And I was saying like it makes sense because the beginning of your career was a something you said was like a pivotal, like you thrived in a way, but you're also met with a lot of challenges, prejudice, and like people kind of questioning like if you're even the right hire and everything. And I know that comes with a lot of different just baggage. It takes an emotional toll, and you talk about it this book, like all those emotions can end up leading to like a shorter life expectancy, which is something I've never actually thought about. You think about, dealing with or going to a workplace and dealing with some type of whether it's straight up racism, some type of discrimination, harassment. Just think about having to deal with that in the moment, but not the how that emotional toll can lead to, kind of dying sooner from stress and everything. So, would love to kind of hear like just looking back your experience at Reuters as a reporter. Um, what was it like kind of working there kind of day to day?
yeah. It's funny. I'm of the mindset, and I'm on the circuit. I speak to a lot of students these days, and and I have kids now, and so one of the things that I really try to drill home to young people, especially young people of color, particularly young Black people, is that the only barriers that exist for us are the ones that we have up here, right? I personally believe that there's never been a better time than now in human history to be alive. And that means that there's never been a better time than now to be young and talented and Black. Because for all of the talk about what's happening with some of these DEI and inclusion programs, and affirmative action getting overturned, there's still a world of opportunity out there for us. And within the context of corporate America, I think there's a lot of positives with corporate America. You can make a good salary, you can build a good life for yourself. When you think about where we were as a country 50, 60, 70 years ago, even if you had an education, some of the opportunities that are available to us now were not available back then. Black people, believe it or not, our wages are higher than they've ever been. Our employment numbers are higher than they've ever been. We have more Black people running Fortune 500s than we ever have. So there's a lot of good stuff to point to. But there are shadows to this. There's shadows to all of that light. And, you know, the catalyst for me going on this journey was the death of my uncle, Juan Simpson. He died at the age of 48, heart attack. He was fit. He seemed healthy, and we were all stunned by him passing. And I've spent the better part of the last 23 years trying to understand why he died so young. And, 4 years after his death, I started my career as a reporter at Thomson Reuters. And, Reuters is a tough place. I have former colleagues, they're white, and they went through a lot of tough stuff in that place as well. But because of who I am and where I'm from, I was affected by the difficulties of that job in a way that's unique to me, and I think in a way that's kind of unique to black men. For me specifically, I'm coming into that place, left my college newspaper. I literally left being the editor of my campus paper at Long Island University. I walk into this newsroom at Thomson Reuters, and there's a learning curve that comes with that. And it's not just a learning curve from the standpoint of learning how to do the job, which is hard enough. There's a social learning curve to fitting into that place. There's a learning curve to understanding what does it take to fit into a corporate culture. And there's also a learning curve as far as dealing with some of the pressures of American corporate life. I'm a kid, I'm coming out, I've got student loan debt hanging over my head. And, you get that job and it almost becomes existential. Like, I got to make this work. Because if I don't, I'm going to be back living in the bedroom in my mama's house. I'm trying to build a life. I don't have generational wealth to fall back on. I don't have, financial resources to fall back on. And so when things don't go right at work, they affect you a little bit differently. The stress of making sure that everything is right, it's very existential. And, I also started looking at data and, within the context of my uncle's passing. And, I've learned that black men, we have the second lowest life expectancy of any demographic in this country. The other piece is the higher that we climb on the socioeconomic ladder, the farther we go up, the higher our rates of anxiety and depression. And I got hit with anxiety when I climbed that ladder and landed that job, because now I'm hustling, trying to, maintain. And while you're trying to maintain, you're starting to lose, some of the social ties with people that you used to be close to, because they're not climbing up the socioeconomic ladder. They're looking at you as money bags all of a sudden. You come around, hey, yo, Just, can you do me a solid? And then, you got to reach in your pocket, dealing with siblings, cousins, that kind of thing. I mean, that's a real thing. You can't turn to them for an ear to understand what it is that you're dealing with. And so you're kind of carrying some of these burdens alone. And, the stresses of being in that place, I got told straight up by the person who hired me, we're skeptical of you. We are skeptical of your ability to do this job. We're going to give it to you on a probationary basis over 90 days, sink or swim. And I don't think any of that was inherently racist, right? But, you're in a place where there's no leaders of color. You're a young black person that's coming from a certain background. And so that's affected me maybe a little bit differently than, say, a white person that gets hit with that same type of thing. And, as a black man, I'm more likely to develop hypertension. I'm more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. And that type of stress, it did affect me. I struggled to fit within the fabric, the social fabric of that newsroom. And, I struggled to find that place of psychological safety. And I think the company did a poor job of providing that for me, because I think the best companies, when they onboard employees, they do a good job of creating psychological safety for their employees so that they can do their best work. And as a reporter, as a writer, you got to feel safe in order to do your best work. So to this day, I don't think they got the best version of me, because that psychological safety wasn't there. And then with the anxiety, Walter, I developed acid reflux.
Mm.
There was some negative impacts to my blood pressure. And one of the things that I'm trying to do with this book is to provide practical solutions to us as black men on how to deal with that, on how to find a place of comfort, even in situations where we're going to be uncomfortable. Because unfortunately, sometimes these environments can be very uncomfortable for us from a social standpoint, particularly when you're early on in your career.
Yeah, no, it's real. I currently work with for a black owned company, and it's night and day the difference. And just like the thought of going to another job, it's like okay, I gotta like if I were to leave, I have to mentally prepare myself to no longer be in this like a predominantly black environment.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. Now, you said a couple of things that I think are just really, really important. One, just I think now, in this year of 2025, people are starting to understand anxiety a bit more and kind of more open to mental health. There's still a lot of normalizing that needs to go on, but I think part of that is feeling like you're the only person experiencing this.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, even to an extent now a bit, it's almost like a sense of shame to kind of admit things like anxiety or even real time, even be aware that it is anxiety. Did you know, real kind of thinking back, did you know that you were experiencing anxiety real time, or is it kind of in hindsight?
I didn't really think about it because, you're just trying to get through each day.
Mm.
And I went through stretches, brother, where I would throw up in the morning before work because that stress would hit me in my stomach. And I would deal with that day to day, bro. It was draining. And, I would go to work tired and fatigued. And I was really struggling. The thing that saved my life, I'll keep it 100 with you, is I met my wife at a house party. And, her presence in my life gave me something else to focus my energy on. And it kind of set me at ease. I haven't had that problem since. So,
Mm.
Annika, if you're listening to this, you were my cure for the anxiety. But, it was tough on a day to day basis. And at the time, I didn't have the language for it. I didn't have the language for what I was going through. And, I want to part of what I'm doing with this book, is letting brothers know that, it's all right to admit when you're going through these types of things that you should not feel like you have to suffer through it alone. I suffered through it alone, and you don't have to suffer in silence. I think therapy is something that can be a huge help in that regard. The other thing that could be a big help is if you work in a large company, making it a point. Look, there's business resource groups, right, for people of color and marginalized populations. That's one thing. But like one of the things that I have found since then is like you got to find friendships at work.
Mm.
You have to have friends at work. You got to have besties at work, man. You got to have people that you look forward to seeing on a day-to-day basis. Because the reality is you're spending more of your time at work than you are with your loved ones. And one of the things that I learned as I moved on in my career is that, I would make friends. It didn't matter what somebody's racial background was. There was a group of white guys actually at one of my last jobs. I'm actually going to send them this podcast because they're going to get a kick out of this. But we created a softball team. And I named that team the BK Broilers. I named it after the Burger King sandwich. I don't think they make that. I haven't been to Burger King in years, but we called it the BK Broilers. And that team sucked. We lost every single game. But we would go out and we would drink beer after the game and we would bond and we became friends. And to this day, we're on a group chat and we've taken trips with each other. I mean, these are my guys. And I think it's important for us, to understand to make a friend, you got to be a friend too. And so we sometimes, can put ourselves, I put myself in a bit of a shell. I probably, as a young person, I probably could have done more to be a friend to others, to get out of that shell. I and this is going to sound real naive, Walter, but I tend to believe in the better angels of the people in our country. I know that the rhetoric is divisive right now, and that has filtered its way on down through the rest of American life. But I tend to believe that most people are not racist. I think most people want to be seen as open-minded and accepting of others. I would like to believe that, and we have to have enough faith to put that to the test when we're in these corporate environments as well.
Mm. Something that I was shocked by when I first started creating the Working While Black series. At first, it was this part of this program with LinkedIn. This was a live series. I was really shocked by just how well received it was
Yeah.
from people who weren't black and people who are following me for everything I'm talking about Working While Black, but they're not black at all. But I mean, part of it is like the information is kind of for everybody, but also it's just like just people wanting to show up and have a true like comprehensive understanding of what's
Yeah.
going on. Because I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people. It's easy for everything to be divisive, just very very easy. But I do think like I just think back to like Fred Hampton, right? Like there should be more statues up of him, but he was had at a moment of time he had like people like white supremacists kind of standing right there next to him, people that on paper you wouldn't like. They should not be standing next to each other unless there's a fight about to happen, but that happened because they kind of found this like kind of common ground. So
Yeah.
I like that. I like your perspective.
The other thing that I learned, Walter, and this is me now having almost 20 years of corporate experience, is that I have a whole chapter on this too, is leaning into faith. And it's not a religious faith. I don't mention God in that chapter. It's faith in yourself. We have to have faith in ourselves that when we get in the room, it's because we're there for a reason. They hired us because we're good at what we do. And you're not supposed to, shrink yourself just because it might make somebody else uncomfortable. You got to have an almost irrational level of confidence in your ability. You remember back in the day the saying, be like Mike? Mm-hmm. I say in the book, don't be like Mike, be like J.R. Smith. I'm a diehard New York Knicks fan, okay? That's been a painful existence in my life. However,
prayers.
We used to have a brother on the team named J.R. Smith, and J.R. Smith was a brother that in basketball, he was known as an irrational confidence guy. He's that dude on the squad that's going to come in and he's just going to shoot. He thinks every shot is going to go in, and he could shoot you into a game, he could shoot you out of a game, but he's going to shoot that rock. And he drove me crazy as a Knicks fan. But from a philosophical standpoint, you got to be like J.R. Smith when you're in corporate America as a black man. You got to have that irrational faith in yourself, in your ability, that when you're in there shooting them shots that they're going to fall. You can't be in there scared. And you can't be afraid to, you can't shrink yourself. And that's something that, I had to learn over time.
He really must have an insane amount of confidence. My last memory of J.R. Smith was that finals when he had caught the ball, kind of dribbled it because he was thinking okay, we still got top left. We're going to sponsor.
He became a meme off of that.
Right? Yeah. Man, but definitely a legend though, underrated.
Yeah. He's
underrated.
A good dude too. He's a good dude. He's educated. Yeah. He just finished his degree. He's doing some good stuff.
That's what's up. Shout out to J.R. Smith. Shout out to all the legends, kind of still pursuing greatness after basketball. Let me introduce you to what might become your new best friend. All right, it's an app called Notion. I started using it because I felt like I was juggling way too much, right? From personal projects, work, podcasting, budgeting. It was just way too much. But Notion has become a game changer for me. All right, it's an all-in-one workplace that allows me to plan, write, organize, and collaborate with ease. Essentially, I like to say it takes the chaos in my mind and puts it in one place where I can streamline my whole entire workflow. So if you want to check it out, check the comments, the description. There's a link where you could go ahead and set up your free trial and check it out today. All right, now back to the show. All right, so that confidence in yourself, right? That could be challenging, especially in imposter syndrome if you're one of few in a certain work environment. But something in your chapter, I think, is, honestly, every single chapter is no, you gotta read this one, gotta read this one. And this book is set up honestly, you can skip around to the part that applies to you at this very moment in time. But you have a whole chapter around wealth, closing the racial wealth gaps, and also really knowing and demanding your worth. Now that's something that I'm working on real time right now. So, but how does that start, right? Because you could demand all you want, but not really kind of get what you're looking for. So, what are some of your like kind of a best advice or best practices for kind of that process of knowing and
Yeah.
then learning how to communicate that with your boss?
But it's interesting. So I went on this journey to write that chapter. How do you negotiate salary? It's called the money chapter, negotiating salary and then turning your hard-earned wages into generational wealth. And on the wage front, one of the things that startled me when I was doing my research for this book was to learn that, obviously we have a racial wage gap. I believe, I say in the book that black men are earning roughly 80 cents for every dollar that white men earn, and that compounds over time. And, in doing my homework for that chapter, that data point is not necessarily because companies are nefariously saying, look, we want to conspire to pay black people and black men less than their peers. There are some biases, that we're up against and that still need to be addressed. That is part of the equation. But another important part of that equation is that we have to have higher expectations of what it is that we're worth. Black people in general have lower expectations of what their peak earnings should be for the same job as their white peers. Yeah, we have lower expectations, and part of the issue is we've got to expand our networks. Let's say I work in marketing. I need to talk to other marketers at my level about what it is that they're making, and not just black marketers. You got to talk to marketers of every background, of every gender, and don't even just start with, and don't even just stop with the market that you happen to be in. I'm based in the New York tri-state area. I want to know what marketers are making in Chicago. I want to know what they're making in LA and in San Francisco and so on and so forth. And I want to talk to people of different backgrounds to really get that sense of what my market value should be based on the level that I'm at. And I'll tell you, companies are now starting, in certain states, they're required to post salary ranges. And, that has helped pay transparency in some respects, but in others, it's not uncommon to see a range that goes from, I don't know, 100,000 up to 250. Like, where am I supposed to fall in that type of range? How do I know what my market value is, right? And if I ask for that top number at the height of the range, I got to be able to justify that number. I have to be able to understand what it is that I should be earning. And I went through a situation with a company, not too long ago where, recruiter reaches out and, I agree to have an initial HR screening, and we're having a conversation. Everything with the role is great, and the salary range looked great. I had to be at the top of the range based on where I'm at and based on my current market value. And they said to me, well, we really want to, spend $30,000 less on this role. So I said to them, all right, keep it moving. Keep it moving. Listen, man, I follow the NBA. I make a lot of NBA analogies in this book. And one of the things that you learn following these sports is every few years, these players become free agents and they get to renegotiate their contracts. And when you're at the peak of your earning ability, when you're playing in the league, you got to be maxing out that money. And I think we have to take a similar approach. You have to be out there canvassing the market, understanding what your market value is, and really also accepting the harsh truth that don't ever go into a company taking less than what you think you are owed and thinking that you're ever going to make that up. You never will. If you accept less than what you're supposed to be making, they might hire somebody for the same job at your peer level. They'll be making 10,000 more. You'll never catch that person, and then that money will compound over time. So I want us to have that conversation on understanding your worth and recognizing that you should always negotiate salary, because the only time you have leverage with a company is either when you're on your way in or you're on your way out. Once you're in, you're in. And that I had to
Yeah.
learn some tough lessons around that. And I don't want I want folks to learn from the stuff that I put in the book and learn from some of the trial and error that I talk about.
Right. That is a pro tip right there. My first job out of college, they paid me I think $500 more than what I was asking for, and
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, let's do this." It got in there, and then I think maybe a year in, I started to learn what other people made, and I was like, "Oh, wow!" So
yeah.
it was like a me not even understanding what the I mean, honestly, I think even like the Google search is kind of like the salary I was making was around the range that I should expect to make, and that kind of speaks to something you mentioned in the book. Was like, we have platforms like Glassdoor and LinkedIn to learn about salaries, but it's more accurate to actually speak to
You got to
people
talk to
in
people.
that market. That is so real. And I
Yeah,
remember asking for a raise, and at the time, I actually thought the company was struggling. So he was like, "Oh, we can't do it." I was like, "Okay, yeah, I know it's a hard time." They were like, and they was real bold of them too. But they're like, "Oh, it's not that, but you just don't get someone like a $10,000 raise just in their first year." I was like,
yeah.
and he was because I was so young and everything, and I was just like, "Oh, you could do it, you just don't want
You
to."
don't
So that
want to.
whole "you'll never catch up," that is so real.
And I would encourage people, talk to your colleagues.
Mm.
That's something that is discouraged. Companies don't really want you doing that, but the only way to really understand your worth is you got to gather data. You got to gather information.
Yeah. Okay, for everyone listening, watching, real life challenge right now. This would be like a career growth cheat code. Talk to 3 people at your job that you're cool with. Don't just go to some random person coworker because
Yeah,
they're probably gonna look at you like get out of here. I'm telling HR. But have those conversations. It could be mutually beneficial for both of
yeah.
y'all. Mm-hmm. I
Bonus
like
time
that.
comes around, raise time. How much they hook you up with, man? And don't be afraid to share. I think there's a level of shame sometimes too. We want to, put on airs and have folks thinking one thing, and you know, it has to be people that you trust. But definitely, you got to canvas. You got to gather the data.
Let me introduce you to what might become your new best friend. All right, it's an app called Notion. I started using it because I felt like I was juggling way too much, right? From personal projects, work, podcasting, budgeting. It was just like way too much. But Notion has become a game changer for me. All right, it's an all-in-one workplace that allows me to plan, write, organize, and collaborate with ease. Essentially, I like to say it takes the chaos in my mind and puts it in one place where I can streamline my whole entire workflow. So if you want to check it out, check the comments, the description. There's a link where you could go ahead and set up your free trial and check it out today. All right, now back to the show. Something else in your book. I want to pivot real quick because when I read this, I was like, whoa, hold on a second. You said in the book, we're fortunate to live in a time where we no longer need to be twice as good as the next person to get ahead. We just need to do good work, be strategic, and work to become the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And this book is a roadmap in order to do that. Now, that caught me because still to this day, especially now where a lot of DEI programs are being removed, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it should all be work based on merit and your work ethic," which is kind of funny because these programs are supposed to exist because these things weren't being recognized. But so the mindset is like, "Oh, we're back to kind of going twice as hard, 3 times as hard, outworking everybody." But you're saying that might not be the case for everyone.
It's a matter of perspective, right? I believe, and I'm willing to be challenged on this too. But my belief is that if I come into this with the mindset that I got to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, nobody's going to outwork me. I think there's a physical component to that can put our health in danger. And so I almost want us as black men, as black people, and I even encourage people of any background, you almost have to put blinders on and just run your own race
Mm.
and and just be faithful to the talent you've been given and do everything you can to maximize it. Do good work and do good work and be excellent only because being excellent matters. You want your name to be associated with grade A quality standard, right? A good reputation is worth more than gold. So for my perspective on it is, I just want to be excellent only because being excellent matters. I can't control some of these other factors that are out of my purview, but I want to remove from us this idea that we have to be exceptional. I want us to embrace the idea that you are more than enough, that if you're giving your best effort, then that's all that matters. And I think being a father kind of gave me this perspective. I also think that, we are fortunate to be living in a time where these doors are open in many respects. Are there barriers? The data tells us there continues to be barriers. That would be a naive perspective to not acknowledge that, right? We have 500 companies in the Fortune 500. Eight black people are running, those companies, right? There's still gaps. Managerial ranks at many companies are still, we don't think they're diverse enough. That's why we've had these DEI programs. The problems are there. I just think for us, it's a matter of perspective to preserve our mental and our physical health. And I know that might strike some people as controversial, but that's how I tend to think about it. And it's carried. I'm an executive at the largest bank in the world right now. I'm on to doing other great things as well. I've been a VP at Goldman Sachs. I've had seats at the table. I've flown in some pretty high air, and I've gotten there by just focusing on being the best version of myself I can be. I can't control any of the other stuff. I think you burn out. I think you can become cynical, and it leads to burnout having that other perspective.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like I said at the beginning, reading this book, I was like, am I working myself to death? Because I started to experience different, I personally wouldn't even call it alarming, but I should probably take another look at it. But certain things, and now I'm like, oh, okay, is this like kind of a health thing associated with stress at work? And is it something I need to address real time? Because I like what you said about like what you control is doing good work. You can't really control how other people view you. You can just continue to show up and do what you can and be excellent. But and to be honest, I think maybe in the fall of last year, I kind of had this moment of realization that I feel like I'd been waiting for kind of life to kind of happen for me. Like, okay, once this happens, I'll be able to do this and do that. But it's just something switched because I lost something and or lost this opportunity that I had right there. And I was like, you know what? I can no longer control these things. I really just have to focus in on just what I can control. So real time in that moment, I'll let y'all know, a year from now how that all goes. But it just feels a lot better because I've just kind of just pushed a lot of things out of my mind, just kind of focusing in on what I do have to be able to do. So love that share. And I know, you just mentioned, you sitting up pretty high and everything. You're also on the board of trustees at Long Island University. So you got things to do. So I'm going to let you go. But just last question for you. I'm very big on community, right? This shirt right now is a community made, not self-made. And one thing I love to ask everybody is, how has your community shown up for you?
Yeah, my community has shown up for me big time. I did a launch event for my book a couple weeks ago in my hometown. I'm in South Orange, New Jersey. Maplewood is our sister town. We had a bookstore event, and we packed that bookstore, man. And, the thing that has been most eye-opening for me is that although I felt inspired to write this book for black men, company men, a wellness guide for black men in corporate America, because I want us to stay healthy even while we're grinding. American culture forces us to maximize our human capital. There are market forces bearing down on us, compelling us to make as much money as we can in this society. This is a very harsh society when you don't have enough money. And, I want us to be able to survive within that framework while also being healthy and not dying too young. Because I'll tell you this, I lost a colleague, 45 years old, managing director, making big money, super inspirational to a bunch of us, but dead at the age of 45. Another colleague, he became one of the first black CIOs of a major Wall Street firm. And, late 40s, massive stroke, debilitated for the rest of his life. I got another homeboy who is recovering from a stroke, not even 40 yet. He works for an NBA franchise in creative. All of these guys looked fit and they looked good on the outside, but the grind, right? The grind. And I have other examples of black men getting into these spots and dying young. And the community has showed up for this message. This is a call to action for those of us that work in these environments to get on top of our physical health. A lot of black men, we don't go to the doctor. And there are historical reasons why a lot of us don't go. It's also scary. It's a bit existential. Somebody sizing up, whether this physical flesh of yours is going to continue to exist. That's how I look at it, right? Going to the doctor is very existential, especially when you're over the age of 40, brother. But I'm trying to compel us to gather as much data as we can about our physical health, lean into therapy if you need it. It's a very important resource. I don't use it all the time. I go to it when I feel like things are crashing down on me. And then understanding, certain nuances about our life as black men. We're forced to internalize. A lot of us feel forced to internalize negative emotions at work, to feel like we have to, bottle up things that might make us a little bit angry. And, it's important that we find release valves for that, even in the office. And don't be afraid of double standards. There's ways to tactfully do some of that work. So I want us to, the community has really showed up, I think, for this message. And black women have showed up. A lot of them are buying the book for their sons or their partners or their nephews or their friends. And that has been really heartwarming. And it's inspired me to make sure that the next book I write is going to be a little bit more universal. But this first one, I felt called to write it for us.
Absolutely. Each one teach one. I love
Yes, sir.
that, man. Well, thank you for your time, everyone. Make sure y'all go look at it's available in all the places. Yeah, no excuse. It's easy to find.
Barnes and
Check it
Noble, Amazon, and it might even be at your local bookstore. I know we got decent pickup at certain bookstores.
Hey, I love it. Well, I definitely see this being just like something across the nation, across the world. This is a must. I enjoyed reading. I'm still reading it, but I've enjoyed it so far. So well written. And thank you for this. And for everyone watching, I mean, shoot, there's nothing else to plug. Go check this book out. Gift it to somebody. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna challenge y'all. I think read it for yourself or gift it to somebody. There'll be a really great gift. They'll be surprised to receive it. But if y'all enjoyed this, continue to follow. We have more great episodes coming out with more people like Justin who are not just have gone from surviving to thriving, but are coming back to share everything they've learned. And we'll have links to this book on all the platforms in the description as well too. But thank you all for joining, and we will catch y'all next time. Peace,
brother.